We are Penn State. Come on in, everybody. Come in. It's Friday, September 16th, 2022. You should be able to hear the music now. People are like, I can't hear the music. I turned it up. So if you can hear it, great. If you can't, I'm sorry. It's probably your TV. Welcome to this Friday's Community Forum. Very exciting day. A lot to talk about. We have a returning guest and a new guest as well for our Community Forum today. Say hello again to Mr. Hans. And then our very special guest, brand new Community Forum discussion member, Mr. Borkhand, aka Richard. Did I say Borkhand right?
You said you said Borkhand right, but you mispronounced Richard, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, come on, my friend. How you doing?
Thank you. Very well.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and in the comments section, as you're coming in, let us know where you're from. Do tell us if you can hear us okay, see us okay. Everybody already knows you, Hans, so maybe we'll just allow Richard to go ahead and give us an introduction, who you are, how you got involved in Tesla, and then just kick off the discussion for us, and we'll get started right away.
Sure. I'm a native Californian, first generation American. I'm a lawyer by trade. I apologize. The best I could say is the best example of me is my kids. So I have 3 kids. One, unfortunately, is a lawyer in New York on Wall Street. He's much smarter than I, luckily. My oldest works for Apple and is works on the watch. And he was a classically trained musician, French horn, and then taught himself kind of computer programming and went to Apple. And my daughter is a zookeeper at the LA Zoo. So I have a menagerie, literally and figuratively, of kids.
So sounds like you've done a great job.
Thank you. You kind of asked me, and I threw out a topic. What I was thinking about was kind of why I invested in Tesla stock, and there's a lot of reasons. And I kind of wrote them down. Obviously, one is because I'm interested in protecting the environment and all that stuff. 2 was Elon, because he's just a really interesting character, and a brilliant guy. So I ultimately decided I'd just kind of throw my support behind him, and notwithstanding whatever foibles or mistakes or missteps I thought in the grand scheme of things, he was much smarter than me, and I would ride with his kind of coattails. 3, the money. I thought I'd make a lot of money ultimately on it. 4, and unfortunately or unfortunately, this is kind of something that pervades my life otherwise. I thought it would be really exciting because, I could buy Xerox or some other stock or whatever stock that would make money. But this is kind of like ultimately like a soap opera day to day. There's always something going on, good or bad. Ultimately, it's on an uptick, but, there's all pluses and minuses, and kind of the downside lets you appreciate the upside more. Yeah. If it was so constant, it wouldn't be such a draw for me. For me, I'm from California, LA, and it's car culture. So ever since I was a kid, I got a car when I was 16. I had a 1967 Camaro. It was a beautiful, beautiful car. And so anyway, I was just in the car culture, and Tesla is it. So that drew my attention. I've always been interested in technology, and Tesla was always, at the forefront of technology. So that was another draw. I always thought it was somewhat anti-establishment, in essence. I always thought Elon was that way, and that was something that appealed to me somewhat. I come from a somewhat unorthodox background. My parents were Holocaust survivors. My sister lives in one country. I was born in the United States. So I probably have a little bit different view of the world, and maybe, a little more distrusting of government based on history. So I kind of like the anti-establishment stance. I like the team-oriented approach of everybody who follows Tesla. Everybody is kind of on the same page. Everybody's rooting for the same thing. And it is like a team. And I find that a really positive psychological thing. And last part is I'm interested in solar energy. So Tesla, maybe one day will produce enough solar panels so I can get a solar roof in my house, that's what I'm waiting for.
That's great. That day is coming, I'm sure. Maybe in the next 10 to 20 years. Who knows?
Maybe.
That's right. When was your first? What was the first time you invested in the company, Richard?
About 3 years ago.
Okay.
I didn't invest. I'm an attorney, so I'm familiar with, but didn't invest in the stock market until about 3 years ago. So
Okay.
I've enjoyed the Mr. Toad's wild ride to this point in time, but I have a long enough horizon. I figure, I figure I have at least 10 years. I can let it sit. So I figure over 10 years, I hope in 10 years, we're far better positioned than we are today.
Yeah. What's interesting about that time horizon is that I guess 2019, about 3 years ago would have been 2019. So that's exiting what I'd like to call the FUD years, right? Or kind of like from like 2014 to 2019, the stock was sort of range bound for what seemed like forever. And then once they started posting those profitable quarters back to back is when really the stock had that gigantic leg up to where we are today. What was that like? Sort of like how were you able to separate the signal from the noise at that time? Because there was quite a bit. I'm curious to hear how you kind of listed all the different sort of reasons why you like it, but was there a lot of noise that was keeping you from discovering that, and how did you parse through it?
I don't think I had the available cash, or I didn't want to make the cash available. I don't know which one, because I could have taken it out of my house or something like that. I had enough equity, but I just wasn't. I was focused elsewhere, so I just wasn't focused on the investment part. And unfortunately, more of my investment came post-split, post-high than pre-high. So I'm more riding on the come as opposed to I can retire.
Gotcha. Okay.
And but Teslas are everywhere. I live outside of LA, so I don't live right in LA. I kind of live between Malibu, Calabasas, and Westlake Village, if any of those mean anything.
Okay.
And but you constantly see Teslas on the road. And as a matter of fact, from my house, about maybe a half a mile out in Agoura, there is a Tesla service center just sitting there. So they're everywhere. So it's part of the culture. And ultimately, California has like about 40 million people, and despite all its political and other crazy issues, it's got a huge car. We buy a lot of cars, so we make a huge impact on Tesla's well-being.
Have you seen it even to this day? So I know 2019, there's probably going to be a lot of Tesla cars driving around that region anyway, but have you seen an uptick in how many Teslas are driving around nowadays as well, or is it pretty steady?
No, I've seen an uptick, but I've seen more of an uptake in chargers. So I'll go to like a movie theater and I'll see movie theater, there'll be a bunch of chargers. And that to me is even more obvious than the number of vehicles. Looks like the infrastructure is moving at even a faster pace than the autos themselves.
That's good to hear. This is probably a specifically a California thing, because I'm not seeing that nearly as much around these parts. I still feel like destination chargers do exist in, say, Austin, but they're not becoming I'm not seeing a gigantic surge. There's like one or two, right, at spots. And I think the Domain, which is a sort of North Austin spot, they have their decks have a lot of EV chargers, but it's not commonplace to see them. Whereas it sounds like it's becoming much more so, at least around the parts that you're at.
Yeah, Richard. It is, and it probably started. Yeah, my guess is they always had a heavier presence here anyway, and it's a bigger market, so it makes sense. They're going to sell more here, and they should be.
Yeah, for sure. Hans, did you want to ask any questions, or did you have anything in mind there you wanted to throw out?
I was just thinking about the chargers, and I'm pretty sure they said they prioritize those based on wait times, and so basically wherever they have long wait times on chargers is where they build them. And so I know that the charging infrastructure there in and around LA is a lot better than it is here in the middle of nowhere, Texas. So we've got like one charger within that's like an actual supercharger. There's a couple of like little destination chargers here and there within about 50 miles of here, and then like one supercharger.
Yeah, I do find it interesting. So like where my head goes to is when we're talking about chargers, this sort of bill that was signed recently, the EV, call it the EV bill is what I call it. It's part of the Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA. But that whole charging infrastructure piece of it is really interesting to sort of follow, because I'm curious, is this the time where Tesla really needs to make a giant push to move the standard towards theirs, or are we just going to go down a path of having a situation where, like in the say the charging for phones, you have Lightning, you have USB-C, you got USB whatever B or whatever those formats are. I'm curious if this is the signal for Tesla to really start to invest heavily in lobbying or whatever to start pointing that ship towards that direction. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts around that.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to see that. The Tesla charging standard is obviously way better. And I mean, I guess, so one question that I have, that if anyone in the chat knows, Tesla has open sourced a lot of their patents. Have they open sourced the supercharger patents? And if so, why are these EV charging companies not using them? Because I think there was some pictures that circulated around on Twitter not too long ago of the inside of like a Tesla charger, and then the inside of the what's the other network called? I'm blanking out on the name. America. Electrify America. Yeah, the EA chargers, and just how radically different and simpler the Tesla charger was. And yeah, even if they don't make that standard, like, people need to work on that, because it's going to be a huge piece moving forward. And as far as, with Tesla, they're just going to have so much excess cash here, especially starting next year. I mean, we could potentially see huge prints in Q3 and Q4, that it just makes sense that they really need to go all in on expanding their infrastructure, like Richard was saying that they're doing, but all across the country. And then, as far as overall EV adoption, getting to the point where they have enough excess capacity to where we can go ahead and open up the Tesla network to all EVs. And then, I think that you're right, like going ahead and investing some money in lobbying to go ahead and make this the at least the national standard. It's definitely the way forward, because Electrify America, basically anyone who talks about it, you can't count on being able to charge when you pull up to one. And so if you can't count on it, then that's just going to ruin the EV experience. And, I want Ford's EV experience to be on par with Tesla's. The people who buy a Lightning, people who buy a Mustang Mach-E, people who buy the Hyundais and the Kias that are coming out that are electric, they need to have a positive EV experience so that we can continue to drive adoption. I mean, I guess the IRA will basically drive adoption either way, but it needs to be more convenient.
And I would think to become the standard, that they ultimately have to get government approval, and
exactly,
they have to make nice, and I don't know if Elon is interested in or capable of making nice. And until that happens, it's a battle to become the standard. You could do whatever you want, but you may not be the standard. And kind of the opposite is kind of like NIO in China. The Chinese government got behind battery swapping, and NIO kind of adopted that as their kind of distinction in how they operate. But the government was subsidizing a lot of, at least the initial battery swap stations. So they were in line. So, which I think is good in some ways, because it will mean you're the car company of the government, and that's good. It probably is not good for your margins, because you ultimately have to kind of sell at government prices too if you're going to sell cars to the government. But at least that means the government has got your back. And
Mhm.
that's one of the downsides of Tesla, in my mind, is they're competing. They're anti the government in a lot of ways, and so they're not going to get a lot of favors in return.
You know what's ironic about that statement, though? The IRA seems to have given Tesla a gigantic amount of incentives by accident, almost.
Yeah, I was going to say probably not intentionally. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Based on the conversations I've had with Bradford, it seems like there's a contingent of people in Washington. I definitely wouldn't necessarily say it's the high up edges of the Biden administration, but there's a contingent of people who really understand. I mean, if you dig into the IRA, it's very impressive, the more and more research that I've done on it, how well it is crafted, not only because at first when it came out, I was really nervous. I thought that it was just going to incentivize the demand without doing anything to incentivize all the downstream pieces to increase supply. And so I just thought we were going to basically waste a lot of money and still run into the exact same raw materials bottlenecks in 2025, 2026 with lithium and nickel and all kinds of different battery materials. But yeah, then digging in deeper with Bradford and watching some of the stuff that anyone's not subscribed to the Rockstock channel that Howard Klein and Rodney Hooper have, it's another great resource, and they've done a couple of Rockstock. They did a couple of videos here recently, and one of them was with a guy who's a lobbyist in Washington. I think his name was John. If you can zoom in on that a little bit and go to recent videos. It was like 3 videos ago. Go to the tab where it says videos. Yeah. And then, yeah, that one with John Cowan. There, the fourth one. The one over from there.
The fourth one? Sorry.
Yeah.
This guy.
Yeah. So that episode was incredible. If you go in and you listen to it, and he talked a lot about the behind the scenes that went into crafting it. And they really understand. So apparently, I know that some people in the audience will know this, but they specifically mentioned, one of Bradford's contacts specifically mentioned that people in Washington have been watching Jordan Giesege's limiting factor videos to understand batteries and battery supply chains, and they actually were informed by that. And they said, it just makes the information, because they've got all sorts of academic contacts that they can talk to, but Jordan's information is so much more accessible than any of the reports or other things that they had access to. And so they've been watching that to understand how things were flowing, and that helped them to realize that, hey, we really do need to address the battery raw material supply chain issue and all this. And then, of course, all the geopolitical tensions with China and just wanting to make ourselves more independent from them. And so there's a lot in the bill that actually incentivizes and makes it easier for people to mine here not necessarily mine, but all the refining. So there's nothing in the bill for mining specifically, but basically any step after mining, they've gone all the way back to that and said, hey, there's incentives for building lithium refining capacity here in the United States, which I thought it was I don't think it's a coincidence that Tesla announced its lithium refining project here in Texas right on the heel of that there is specific subsidy money for that. And then we'll see here at the end of September, on September 30th, Manchin, and so part of his deal with the Democratic Senate was that he wants to get some modifications done to NEPA, which is the National Environmental Protection Act, that makes it very hard to do any sort of construction on federal lands. And it's like a 6-year process to go through NEPA. And, I think Rodney has talked about there's usually almost a 10-year lead time between when you start planning mining project in the United States and when it can actually come online. Well, and 6 of those years really have to do with just how long the NEPA process is. And so he's trying to tack on a bill. So the funding for the government is on these temporary deals, and there's one of them that is coming up on September 30th. And so in order for Manchin to sign off on the IRA, he said, okay, I'll do that if we make some modifications here to this whole NEPA process and the timeline. And I think the goal was to reduce it from 6 years down to 3. And all this information that I'm sharing is from that specific video of John Cowan's on the Rockstock channel. So that could radically reduce the lead time to get a project in the United States up and running for anything on federal lands related to battery supply chain. And then there's a whole other group within the government, I can't remember what it was called, that basically, I think he said it was the FAST program, where there's a group in the White House that their goal is to basically fast track projects that they believe are critical to the country through all the regulatory process. And so there's some accommodations in the IRA as well to get lithium and raw materials projects to a point where they are eligible to utilize that FAST program. So a lot of big stuff.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say the FAST program was they weren't going to eat until the materials were available. They were going to fast.
Yes.
Hold on, I got to throw a middle finger to Matt real quick. Okay, we're good. Go for it, Richard. He's
I also heard like Martin spoke recently, and he was talking about that ultimately they were going to. And I've wondered about this because the raw materials. So he talked about, or it was a reference. So I don't know what the question was. But he said ultimately they're going to have factories in all continents, which I hadn't heard that before. But I've always wondered, based upon raw materials, I thought Australia, to me, seems like a slam dunk because of the availability of the raw materials. And I always thought like Argentina, Brazil, somewhere in there, for the same reason that ultimately those were places that would fit that prescription, because at least some of the supply materials would be right on hand. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So there's more than just the battery materials. Those places make a lot of sense from a battery materials perspective, but like Australia specifically, most things are much more expensive in Australia just because it's harder to get them to Australia. A lot of stuff has to be shipped to them. And so anything that is not produced domestically that is required for the car, like if you're going to set up a Tesla factory in Australia, there would be a lot of stuff that you don't currently have to ship very far to get it to the factory now, but you are getting these raw materials from there that are going through China and all over the world. So you'd have some of the battery stuff would be closer, cheaper to transport, but then some of your other components might be a little bit more difficult to get there and more expensive. So I don't know. I was specifically curious and thinking about Australia recently and whether it would end up being a net neutral, a net benefit, or if it would actually be a net negative as far as material transport costs to get all the components that you need to produce vehicles in Australia. And the market itself, I know, is a very small auto market. I know that Japan being the third largest, several people have been talking a lot about Japan recently. Also, South Korea is a huge auto market that's also over there. They're a little bit farther away from raw materials for batteries, but then they have a lot of the other electronic components close by. So, yeah, not sure.
I wonder about like Japan and South Korea, though, because at this point in time, they're basically dying countries. Their populations. I think South Korea has the fastest declining population, and Japan is number 2. And ultimately, you need a workforce to kind of like, you need young workers to put in the factories. And with where like the elderly are 5 times as more prevalent as a 30-year-old, it's a tough fit.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Sorry, Hans. I don't know if you're going to say something else. I was going to jump in.
Go for it. Yeah, that was.
Yeah, I think what's interesting about this entire discussion is that so Tesla is going to be able to essentially for better or for worse, dramatically improve their ability to generate a profit, which is going to allow them to have pricing power that is very, very. It's quite a bit above every other auto manufacturer, call it, unless those auto manufacturers are able to take advantage of those credits. So that's the way I think about it. So if I go fast forward 5 to 10 years in advance, since Tesla, either by happenstance or because this was a strategic call, knowing that this was going to be a thing down the road, I highly doubt it. They just want to be vertically integrated. But them deciding to be vertically integrated and bring all this stuff in-house, they've stumbled upon this opportunity to essentially be able to lower their prices by 10, 15, 20% versus every single other automaker, in addition to the benefits they already get from the manufacturing innovations that they have, 4680 structural battery pack, economies of scale, having just all these different variables. But now you throw this additional one in there that just because they happen to be a manufacturer of batteries, they could take these dollars in a market where, I don't know, say that the market wants to demand a lower price EV vehicle. It seems like they're going to be the only ones to be able to do that in 10 years' time because of this piece of legislation. Again, unless another automaker decides from a strategic perspective to bring that capability in-house so they can take advantage of that bill. And then my head goes to, okay, what does that mean within the dynamics of how Tesla is going to be painted in, say, the media, right? They're going to be like, wow, look at this company is stealing taxpayer money to make cars for the public. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pressure on that. But that's where my head goes. And it's such a fascinating dynamic.
Well, there's one variable in there. So the way that the agreements are set up, for example, all of the batteries that are produced by Panasonic in Giga Nevada, Tesla is eligible for the battery credits that are generated by the production of those batteries. And it's just because of the way that the contract between Panasonic and Tesla is, that Tesla as the customer is actually the one who is eligible to get the batteries or the battery credits in the IRA. As it stands currently, assuming that, once they come out and they give all their clarifications on the bill and what all it takes to be eligible for that, do in fact come to pass. But so the other companies could set up their contracts the same way. Ford can do that. GM can do that, to where even though they're not in-house producing them, but at the end of the day, the battery manufacturers are still going to be the ones that have the leverage, and they can say, okay, you can get the credit, but I'm just going to raise the prices on the batteries by the price of the credit. And so I'm going to get the money in at the end of the day. So it does put them in a tougher spot, but there is a little bit more leeway for manufacturers there to play with. They may be able to split it and not be completely left out in the cold with regards to that money.
I was thinking that there's one other element, and this is both good and bad, because I think, Tesla is going to outkick their coverage. So, I think they're going to do better. Like if it was today, they're going to do better than their stock price will represent. And I believe that's in part because, again, institutional ownership is lower than in most of the big cap stocks. And so there's less of an interest for all the funds to push Tesla to put articles out countering some negative article. And I think as things go on, as Tesla piles up cash, there'll be more institutional ownership, good and bad. And as more institutional ownership comes in, they'll support the price better. And Tesla will be have a much more stable and less volatile rise, I think.
Yeah. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, you're definitely touching on Alexandra's wheelhouse there, that with the hopefully forthcoming investment grade update by S&P, then Moody's will follow. They'll become investment grade. We'll start getting a lot more institutions who currently may or may not be interested in Tesla, but will be, they're currently prevented from being able to invest in it. to go ahead and start getting in, and then it'll be a sheep thing. Once someone starts, other people will follow, and it'll just continue. And so that's one of the big catalysts potentially in the next 6 months to a year for the stock price specifically.
Yeah, it's it's a fascinating thing to follow. There was one question here I want to get to real quick. I don't know if any of you guys have thoughts about this, but sort of this is where my head, it's sort of like in parallel to this, but I don't know if we want to address this question quick. Do you see Tesla licensing or purchasing YZF recycling tech, or will they leave that to Redwood? I think they're just going to allow Redwood to sort of recycle all the batteries because, JB and Elon pretty close. And I'm sure they were talking about this in 2014, and then they were thinking about bringing it in-house, and then JB's like, you know what, I got it. Let me just go start a thing, and now they're going to just utilize that supply chain to make it happen. But where sort of slightly in parallel to this comment, as we're talking about this topic of Tesla really taking advantage of this tax credit in manufacturing or being really part of the manufacturing process of the batteries, how much does this become a incentive for Tesla to really get into the business of selling their batteries to other manufacturers? Because they are going to have pricing power. Mm-hmm. They're going to have pricing power. So Hans, the thing you described there, where the in a relationship with Ford, GM, call it, and say LG or whoever else, ultimately LG or whoever else, CATL, have the ultimate say when it comes to how much they decide to pass on to from a savings perspective to the manufacturer, if they have in the contract, if they have it written in a way so that they take advantage of that EV tax or that credit or whatever it is. Whereas Tesla has full power on how they want to decide to pass on those savings. If Tesla gets to a point where they are the largest manufacturer of batteries in the world in 10 to 20 years' time because of Master Plan Part 3, theoretically, they would have the best pricing power in the market. So does that become, and I wonder if Tesla's thinking about that long term, like, does this bill give Tesla additional incentive to want to flood the market with cheap, high quality, usable batteries for the entire market? And how does that bode for the rest of the market? I don't know if Richard or Hans, if you have any thoughts on that, but.
I was going to first answer the first thing. So they already had an opportunity to get a recycling place in Nevada. I think it's ABML, it's American Battery something, whatever, which is a recycling facility that's right next to the Tesla facility. And I've heard for the past 5 years that Tesla was going to acquire it and use it for battery recycling, and they never did. And it was like, if you were thinking like strategically, it was right next door, so it made a lot of sense, but they really didn't seem to be interesting, which takes me to the battery issue. Ultimately, it just depends on margins. If, their margins suck and it's taking them a lot of, it's still profitable, but the margins are significantly less than selling EVs, and it takes a lot of resources, then it's less attractive. And if the reverse is true, if the margins are great and they figure out the processes to manufacture, and it doesn't take away from the primary purpose, the primary goal, I think, at least the original goal of building cars, if it doesn't decrease that, then I think it's a plus.
Got it. And then
that was a lawyerly answer. That was the yes and the no.
And then as far as the second thing that we discussed about Tesla becoming a potential, like an incentive, now they have an incentive because of this new IRA bill to become a supplier because they have full pricing power when it comes to the cells.
I think that they will do whatever makes the most sense to transition the world to sustainable energy at the time, and it's really kind of difficult to say what that's going to be at this point in time. I think one of the big variables in there is, where is Tesla bought, and how many are they trying to produce? How many batteries do they need for those? Because I think it'd be pretty easy to make a case that if the world is not saturated with robo-taxis and Tesla bots, that Tesla is better served by allocating that cell supply to those projects. And the specific scenario you proposed was, hey, if they have an excess supply of cells, I think, it would make a lot of sense to sell those and, to other people. But I also, it seems like Tesla can figure out how to create value-added products with cells at a faster rate than they can create cells. And so, I don't know how far into the future that's going to continue, but I would posit that it's probably quite a while.
Maybe Tesla bot would be perfectly used in that capacity of building batteries. Maybe because, there's chemicals, dangerous chemicals. It's probably not safe for humans to participate in that.
Yeah.
And maybe ultimately that makes the labor costs ridiculously cheap. And maybe maybe that's the arena.
It's already a pretty automated process. There's not a whole lot of, direct human involvement in cell manufacturing. It's a lot of purpose-built machines and robots.
Yeah.
I was going to say the downside would be they are not like the first mover. There's existing battery companies, so they're competing against like Panasonic and the like, and BYD. The Chinese EV maker is a big battery producer also. So it's a more competitive area. I don't know if they have the lead necessarily in manufacturing capacity, et cetera.
There was a comment that was dropped here where we're talking about briefly about investment grade. I want to bring it up. Kathy K put it down. We were talking about sort of how the Tesla becoming investment grade. Richard was walking us through how does the additional cash influence into institutional buying, especially if they get investment grade. Comment from Kathy. Kathy, big supporter of the show. I want to tell this story again. The first time we had Gary Black, his microphone was, let's just say, less than perfect. And Kathy donated $100 to the stream. I think initially jokingly saying, get Gary a new mic, but we actually used $100 and we got Gary a new mic. And so that's why in the second one he sounds so good. So Kathy, I'm not going to forget that. It's you. You're the reason why Gary sounds good, okay? Don't let him forget on Twitter. But she said after Apple became investment grade, CFO bought back shares to the tune of the entire debt issue. But what's interesting there is that Tesla doesn't have debt. So, but how much of a sort of lever can they pull? Like, could this be part of the cashback plan? I'm curious.
Yeah. So what she's referring to is another thing that Alexandra's been talking about, where it's, one of the things that Tesla can do if they decide to, is they can issue new debt. When they issue new debt, it will, they can trigger a rating by S&P 500 and Moody's. And so they'll go from being sub-investment grade to AAA because all of the actual quantitative metrics more than justify it. And then they can use the whatever debt that they issue to then go back and purchase shares and do share buybacks with that money on the open market. And, this was basically what Apple did in 2013. They trolled basically the financial community. They said, hey, we're going to borrow your money and then we're going to use it to buy back our stock. You're going to, and we're going to get a whole bunch of people piling into the stock from institutions at the same time that we're reducing the float because we're buying back shares. And it translated into a huge run for Apple. And so, yeah, the question is, does Elon and Zach decide that, hey, that's some a game that we're willing to play, that we're going to troll them, because they do have to pay S&P and Moody's rating fees in order to, when they go say, hey, we're going to get the new debt. And so the whole S&P 500 Moody's credit rating deal is kind of a pay to play game. And so on the one hand, you say, I just don't want to play, and whenever they upgrade us is whenever they upgrade us, or you can troll them like Apple did.
Yeah. I guess of course the ultimate troll will just be to buy them.
That would be amazing. Could you imagine?
That would be awesome.
Yashu in the house. Yashu hit that bid. Congratulations on 20,000 subscribers, by the way. Finally, we got you there, bro. That's amazing.
Appreciate it.
Great to hear.
How's it going, guys?
Absolutely. Doing great, man.
Good.
Yeah, I'm just these community forums. I wanted to try something today. We're having an amazing discussion with Richard and Hans, and I saw Matt and Yashu and others in the comments section. And I just went on DN. I'm like, here's the link. If you want to come on, you can. I don't care. It's a community forum,
I actually I clicked on the link. I went through my camera setup and I hit enter studio thinking I'd be in the background, and I popped right in. I was like, oh, well, I'm here.
Yashu, I don't fuck around, bro. You're sick and you come in, you're in.
That's what she said.
Hey. Any thoughts, Yashu? I know you were probably in the comment section not too long, but or I don't know how long you were in the comment section for, but any thoughts about sort of what we're talking about
with the bond buybacks and the credit rating
bond
and all that stuff?
buybacks, EV tax credit ratings? Yeah.
Well, the biggest thing for me is like how much of this is already is Wall Street not pricing in. I think Bradford said he doesn't think any of this bottom line with the battery credits is being priced into earnings, EPS at all. I mean one other thing is it's not just next year, right? It's like in perpetuity, like until 2030 actually. So not in perpetuity. So until 2030 at least. And it's like no one really, other than Tesla, is really primed to take advantage of the credits and all the and perhaps direct payments. We don't actually know exactly how it's going to be fed in. So I don't know. This is aside from the consumer demand. This is like free money essentially that Tesla can just take and run with just their current supply that they have of batteries at a Giga Nevada. So it's exciting times. I'm not sure how much of this is not being baked into EPS, but I'd imagine what would happen is after the earnings call, they probably get some questions asked. Tesla IR does. They answer them. They come back a couple days later with some sort of updated notes on EPS updates for the next fiscal year. And then that's when I'd imagine a lot of the buying frenzy may occur if they actually if they actually deem to this to be a material enough to the bottom line.
Interesting.
I happen to think some of it is actually baked in. Because if you look at Tesla's performance versus some of the other big techs over the last month or two, we're doing less worse. And that might reflect a little bit of a bump that, because to me, it's almost like Tesla is now being considered, if you look at performance, it's in the current market, it looks like Tesla is almost like a quality stock, not a speculative growth stock. And money's still coming in. There's still volume. And I can't say that about everything else, Facebook, Apple is dropping considerably. Yeah. So I think there may be some support that's come in based upon all those factors. It would be great in an up market to really be able to see that, but
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of this is window dressing even to end the quarter. We got a couple weeks here left, so I'm not sure because Tesla's outperformed almost every other stock in the Nasdaq, I believe, off the top of my head this quarter. So it would make sense for them to start window dressing in the next couple of weeks, especially. But you're right. I mean, these hedge funds, these portfolio managers they spend millions of dollars on consultants, right, to read these bills, go to Congress, ask questions, find out everything that needs to be read with all this stuff. So yeah, I mean, presumably in a free market, they would already have known all this way before us retail folk.
So real quick, guys, we're talking about Tesla's outperformance versus the rest of the market. So if I pull up the NASDAQ index, it's down 15% last 6 months. Tesla's up 7% last 6 months. So that's 22% essentially overperformance versus the NASDAQ. If I do, I don't know, let's just use Apple, which is one of the all-time value stocks, right? Apple in the last 6 months, down 6%. Tesla's up 6%, so a 12% delta. In the market, go ahead.
Do year to date if you can, yeah.
So Apple down 18%, Tesla down 25%. Okay.
Yep. So dude, why are you not using Yahoo Finance?
Bro, I don't know.
No, I actually like Google Finance quite a bit. I like it.
Yeah.
I just like being able to do the comparisons really easily where you can put them both on there side by side and change all your time.
You can do that you can do that on Google Finance. I think if you scroll down to the whatever, you can add in a comparison. Okay. It's okay. We don't have to give you a tutorial live on screen.
Why not? Yeah. This is not a tutorial stream. Go ahead.
But you're right. It makes sense. Tesla is still it's hard to outperform Apple considering how low their beta is. Tesla is just going to be more volatile of a stock. But you're right. In the last, especially like month and a half, 2 months, it's been kind of a steady eddy. Tesla, even down today, Tesla's down 1.3% on the day. Let me actually pull up the Nasdaq. Nasdaq's down 1.5%. So yeah, so on a regular Tesla day, Tesla would probably be down closer to 3%. So we're just kind of in line. So yeah, so it's hard to tell. It's hard to discern which variables are causing this.
Sorry, my dogs are like, my wife left to do something, and my dogs are just going crazy out there. I don't even know what the hell they're doing. Sorry. Sorry, Yashu. I just got so like
No,
sidetracked.
I'm just saying,
My apologies.
like, it's just hard to discern. But regardless, whatever variables are affecting Tesla, it's affecting in a good way, that we're not seeing these massive drawdown days. And then even on up days, like, we're actually seeing the beta in effect on the up days.
Mhm.
Like, if Nasdaq's up 1%, Tesla's up 2%. But if Nasdaq's down 1%, Tesla's up down like 1-ish%. So we're seeing some relative strength both on the up and down days.
Gotcha.
I think one of your
Okay.
dogs just ran into my office.
I believe it. Yeah, I was actually gonna go grab him here.
Bring him on stream.
A second ago. I was trying. He's a Chihuahua though. He's a freaking. He just runs. He's always running around. Real quick question here. What about institutional money that can't act on any of the information until they get rated? What happens when they get rated and these bills fully get into the media at the same time? Yeah, I mean, we briefly covered this during the stream. I know this is something that's been talked about. Alexandra's been talking about this quite a bit. That's sort of the big question, is like, what is the market? You have a lot of coalescing catalysts that are happening here in the next couple months, theoretically. Tesla's going to show out on cash flow generation. You have investment grade coming in. You have the realization of this bill, the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, giving Tesla the ability to generate billions of dollars of cash as early as Q1 of next year, if I'm not mistaken, right? That's when the bill kicks in. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's right. Richard, you were talking about before the stream, I think it was, that there were still some rules that would have to be defined as sort of this bill enters into. So can you walk us through that? Because I'm so bad at that stuff. I would love to get your insight.
Because it's, they create the bill and it's very general language, and then it's subject to interpretation. So there'll be examples and situations that'll arise. Somebody will assert a credit or something, and then the government or someone else will oppose it. They'll either resolve that, or there'll be some litigation over it, and that issue will be resolved, and then the regulation will be interpreted, and there'll be some interpretation. That's kind of like true of any of these laws, because if you see these bills, it's like a 1,000-page bill. One, who's read it? And two, most of the language is not really thought. Nobody's really thinking about the language. It's mostly boilerplate, and you can't anticipate every circumstance. So it's kind of almost like every law regulation, ultimately subject to interpretation. And it's not really until something makes it to an appellate court, it's, at least in the United States, it's not officially law. So if I go to a trial and I get a result, that's the result of the trial, but it doesn't become the law of the land. Once it goes up to the next level, it becomes the law of that particular area. Let's say in California, if I'm in the state of California, there's a federal court that controls basically the West Coast. So let's say I have a case in the federal court, it's decided, it then goes to the Court of Appeal. If it's decided by the Court of Appeal, then it becomes the law of that area. And then to become the law of the land, it would have to go to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court would have to rule on it, and then it would become the law of land. Otherwise, you have a bunch, and this is how in reality it works. You have a bunch of jurisdiction and areas that may have same laws or different laws, but interpret them differently, and it makes it a big challenge.
Got it.
So that'll be the same as to the tax credits. I'm sure there will be litigation about the legitimacy of giving the credits at all. I'm sure there will be a lot of litigation like anything else.
So I'm going to try to walk through this. For those that are not familiar, Richard has a law background. He's a practicing lawyer, I'm guessing. Are you still practicing? Or yeah. So this is his wheelhouse. But I want to really learn about the logistics of it. So Q1 2023 comes in. Theoretically, I think this bill says starting in that period, companies should be able to take advantage of the credit. So what happens? What needs to happen for Tesla to be able to realize that cash on its balance sheet? Do they have to submit a form that says this is how much we sent, and then it goes through that approval process?
My guess, and I don't know, but my guess is the IRS will issue some type of regulations or guidelines, and will say if you fit within these guidelines, you're able to take the credit. They'll they'll create a new form 107BQ. You'll file that whenever you need to file it, and then you'll assert whatever you're entitled to, and they'll have the right to come back and contest any portion they think you're not entitled to. And then if it's a tax issue, there's like a tax court you can take it through. But there might be constitutional issues related to the ability to provide the credit, because there's usually people in Congress that are going to oppose something, and it depends how vociferously they oppose it, depends how much power they have it, but they might say it's unconstitutional and take it to a federal court, which is kind of another line of attack.
Okay. Does the IRS, so then this really wouldn't be filed by, the form wouldn't be created for Tesla to file, say, until the first or second quarter of the following year, right? Because that's when they're able to take advantage of the credit, in my head, right? Something like.
Well, that's going to be an issue too, because the IRS is probably operating at low capacity personnel-wise, and this is probably a complicated task. And it's whenever they get the guidelines and regulations done. Hopefully, they can do it before the end of the year, but there's no guarantee they will.
Yep.
Interesting. So,
and you're not going to have to, theoretically, it wouldn't come up really to the following year anyway, your next tax return. So they really wouldn't have to have it finalized until sometime in 2023.
Okay.
Yeah, I wish that we had Bradford here to weigh in on this, because my understanding from him was that at least the battery manufacturing credits, and I don't know if this also applies to the $7,500 vehicle credits, but at least for the battery manufacturing credits, where you've got the $35 per kilowatt hour of battery cells, and then $10 per kilowatt hour of pack assembly, that those they just basically reduce your tax liability, and there's a cap on how much of your tax liability that they can reduce. It's only like 1/4 of your overall tax liability. And so, if it looks like Tesla's going to be generating more than enough profits to utilize almost all of the credits that they generate. But, there is a world in which they just go so ham on cell production that they actually end up getting capped out on being able to take those tax credits. And so it doesn't all flow through to the bottom line, at least not in that year. He said that you can potentially roll those forward into future years for future tax liability. But I mean, if this bill is in place until 2030, that's a long time that you've got that in place.
So let me ask you a real quick question, Hans. So what you're saying is if Tesla, so it works like it's a tax liability reduction, is not necessarily a tax credit. So if Tesla, say end of 2023, they have a tax liability of, I don't know, $10 billion or $5 billion, and they're able to generate credits in excess of $5 billion, they can only recognize $5 billion, right? Is that the way you're describing it? Is that correct? Or is that incorrect?
Yeah, so if they had a taxable income of, well, I'm not sure. This is where, like I said, I wish that Bradford was here. And I
think it was 25%.
Yeah. And I think that I think there are certain things in the bill that are eligible for direct payment to,
like magic.
Hey, there we go. This is what we need.
We're talking about
Get the real
Bradford.
expert in here.
Can you hear us?
I think his mic.
I just throw people in. Poor guy. Go ahead, Hans. Keep talking. Maybe.
So, anyways, I know there were certain parts of the bill that were eligible for direct payments in cash from the federal government to either auto manufacturers or potentially cell manufacturers. But then there are other ones that are basically just tax credits.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm sure he'll be back. I think he's messing with his sound setting to make sure he gets it. Yeah.
But even if there was a carryover, you were saying that the bill ends, I think it's 2032, the credit would expire.
Well, I was just saying that, rolling it forward, if you're generating excess credits that are more than you can use in 1 year, well, you're probably going to also do that in the next year. So you could potentially have a number of years worth of credits that are all just kind of snowball piling up.
Right. I think they're currently aren't they using a loss forward now from their early manufacturing? I think they're
Yes.
currently using that. And so maybe it's just like a financial planning. It'll just run for the next 25 years, even if it's a carryover.
And then we'll get the people that say Tesla hasn't paid taxes and
Interesting. Yeah, I'm waiting for Bradford to come in so we can throw him back into the chat. Yeah, this is all very interesting. Like, it's a brand new dimension that has opened up for this company in the last, like, what seems like last couple weeks, that it almost went from like this would never exist to this could exist, but for the $7,500 tax credit, to no, it's not going to happen because Manchin says no. And then all of a sudden it's like way more than we thought any of this could do. Like, not even just from a demand perspective. You got, and we're not even talking about the freaking demand lever that the $7,500 tax credit is going to do.
yeah.
Like, what is going on? This seems like we're about to enter a period that's going to.
It's basically Christmas, and like the overall size of the IRA compared to the Build Back Better plan, it's like over 90% reduction in the size of the Build Back Better plan, and then it's like even more beneficial to EVs and EV adoption than the Build Back Better plan would have been. So it's pretty crazy.
And to the extent that if it's true that they removed a bunch of battery equipment from Berlin and they rushed it back to the US, that would be significant of what their opinion was about how valuable that battery is.
Yes.
Yeah, it almost seems like they went back to the drawing board and we're like, how can we bail out Legacy Auto even more? Like, and to a degree, like it actually is in the best interest for the acceleration. Like, these guys are going to need all of the credits that they can possibly get to make batteries at a domestically at even at a break even, right? So it's going to cost a lot of money. So
yeah, and I think you're exactly right, Yashu. I think that for the majority, this is a bill that is created to help preserve Ford and GM, but it's going to have whether intended or unintended, the side effect of actually being more of a tailwind to Tesla than either of those two like, it might help Ford and GM survive, and it's going to make Tesla, a runaway winner that we've never seen the likes of before.
Maybe Tesla becomes the battery supplier for both Ford and GM and keeps them alive.
Yeah. Bradford, can you hear us okay, sir?
He's on mute, but yeah.
Yes, I can.
Perfect. We got you. Okay. So, just like the Magic Fairy, where we're saying your name and then you just happened to come on, which was amazing. So I'm very happy about that. So we're talking about the logistics of how the IRA is going to become a reality for Tesla to capitalize on in the coming quarters. And we had some questions around how Tesla can take advantage of the tax credit and sort of the mechanics behind it. Can you just, perhaps for the audience, give us a little bit of, and you've done so much work on this, by the way. If you don't follow Bradford Ferguson, please.
What are you doing with your life?
Yeah, what are you doing with your life, one? And then two, please go to Twitter and follow this very handsome young man right here at Brad Ferguson. All right. So maybe get us up to speed on the latest you've learned about the bill so far. I'm going to step away for 30 seconds because my dogs are doing something weird downstairs. But go ahead, Bradford, and give us a little bit of a rundown, and I'll be back in a few seconds.
Yeah, sure. So the Inflation Reduction Act gives Tesla $45 per kilowatt hour for making battery cells and battery modules, 35 for the cells, 10 for the modules. So at a bare minimum, starting January 1st from Gigafactory Nevada, they should be able to get the tax credits for the full output of Gigafactory Nevada. The 2020 agreement between Tesla and Panasonic says that Tesla gets all the tax credits from the product of that factory. This is pretty standard for a partnership supplier agreement, where the customer gets tax credits and other financial benefits that are ancillary. So that's pretty typical in these big agreements. And I don't think Wall Street knows about this yet or has figured it out. Said a little mini rant about it Wednesday night, and Yashu did a great job covering that. Tesla also is quickly going to be ramping Lathrop, so they should get the $10 per kilowatt hour on the modules for that. And that may ramp to 40 gigawatt hours, so that would be $400 million. Grand scheme of things, how big Tesla's financials, I think we all believe are going to get. This might be minor money, but it's definitely moving the needle enough to even change Tesla's behavior. We're seeing that, they're taking machinery that they intend to put in Giga Berlin and redirecting that to Texas to try and speed what they're doing in Texas, because Germany's not giving them any money to make the batteries in Germany. So $45 per kilowatt hour is very significant. It's almost half of the cost on the batteries. So Tesla's going to be happy to make them in the US and ship them to Germany. So that's a big deal. And there's a bunch of other things like building out solar and battery storage, things like that for the big utility scale projects. That gives the buyers of that a big incentive to make those investments. Tesla may even be motivated to put more batteries and solar at their superchargers and be able to get a significant discount for that.
So one of the specific questions that we had on that was, do you understand the mechanics? Like, are these tax credits that potentially they could get cash from the government for, or which ones are, which ones aren't? And then which ones just really offset their tax liabilities?
Yeah, so tax credit is better than a direct payment. And the items that they would get a tax credit on would be making of the battery cells and modules, and any of the tax credits for making of the cathode or refining the lithium. So they have the cathode factory going up in Giga, Texas. They would get a 10% tax credit for their cost of making the cathode there. If they make a lithium refinery in Texas somewhere, they would get a 10% cost reduction for that as well, tax credit. And for all those items, they can elect to receive those as a direct payment, because all those fall under the advanced manufacturing, production manufacturing credit, or whatever it's called.
So those being the $35 for the cells and the $10 for the
modules.
The modules.
Yeah.
So those are actual direct payment.
Those they can elect for direct payment, yeah, and that's like a 4 or 5 year period that they can start doing that. Yeah.
Wow.
So in one of the Biden bills, didn't the minimum corporate tax rate go to 15%?
Yeah, it did, but there's I'm not a tax attorney, and I did do a space on this with Matt Smith of Good Soil Investment. Let me point you to it. So there's a website, velaw.com, and they have an article called Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 Corporate Alternative Minimum Tax. And basically on these advanced credits, what it allows is that you can use, let's say the alternative minimum tax says your tax is going to be $2 billion. That's a tax owed. You can offset 75% of that with these advanced manufacturing things.
Is it this website, Bradford, or is this something else? Am I VE
Yep.
Law? Okay.
Yeah.
Is it
the
under
title
news?
of the article? Yeah,
That's my site.
Probably under news. For that, if you go back to the home, news, maybe insights then at the top.
There it
We
is.
can put the link in the there it is. We can put the link in the description.
Yeah.
So basically, if Tesla does have that 15% alternative minimum corporate tax, they can get it down to 3.75 potentially by using these advanced manufacturing credits. So So
Wow.
it's offsetting that.
So it's hard, Bradford, to put this on the EPS line, right? Like I originally was thinking like, okay, 1.5 billion, 3 billion shares outstanding. That's 50%. That's 50 cents EPS next fiscal year. But it's not that simple. So it's I guess it's hard to get super excited about it, but it is going to be a material thing over the next 8 years, let's say, right?
Yeah. So let's think about Giga Texas. So it was thought that as Tesla has to scale Model Y and they go to 500,000 cars per year, that they would have to lower prices. But now that there's this vehicle credit as well, the potentially qualifying for up to 7,500 per vehicle, they may not have to reduce prices. So Tesla's going to be able to hold firm on the top line, which is the revenue. And then on the cost level, their battery costs are going to go way down, so their costs are going to drop down. So it's going to help there. And if you think conservatively about Model Y, like before any of this, the gross margin is 30%. So we'll do a little napkin math, a little mathawana here. So we take a $60,000 car, 500,000 vehicles. I believe that's $30 billion. And if you multiply that by a gross margin of 30%, that's $9 billion in gross profit from that factory. So that would potentially cause, like, if for a normal corporation, 20-25% tax rate. I'm not an accountant. So that would be like $1.8 billion in tax.
Okay.
So this is helping them offset some tax. For me, my Tesla model, I kind of have them paying like 20% corporate tax, which is, that's a high level and conservative. So like for Matt Smith, he had Tesla not paying any tax in the US for a long time because they have these things called loss carry forwards.
Right.
And they're technically called net operating losses, or NOLs, that they can already use to offset tax. So this is why some people are like, well, I don't know. But like it's just solidifying the investment in the battery space and minerals and refining. And I think, solidifying supply, not just for Tesla, but also, GM, Ford, even Honda, who we're not sure if they're even making EVs. They're looking at a battery factory in the US. So like, look at what people are doing and planning, and that's a big deal. And Tesla's literally taking machinery from Germany and moving it over to Texas. They still may make some batteries in Germany, but they kind of put that on pause. Go ahead, Farzad.
I appreciate that. Think about the scale of that statement you just made. They're taking machinery from Germany and moving it to the United States to take advantage of this bill. So that should put within context just how large of an opportunity this is for a company like Tesla. I mean, they'll pull any levers they can to maximize what they're trying to do, but moving machinery from one country to another is not cheap. It's really expensive. So I think that,
and it's not just the cost of moving it. You got to re-engineer everything,
reinstall. Exactly.
And it's not just the cost. Things. Yeah, it's not just the cost and difficulty. It's
time.
Just pulling the trigger. Yeah, pulling the trigger on it right away. Who does that? That's difficult to get a decision maker to make a decision right away.
And what also got me fired up about it is, like, when have we seen Panasonic act aggressively? Tesla's had to beg and plead with them to grow their battery capacity at Giga Nevada. And all Panasonic would do in response is increase things by like 10% over the next 2 or 3 years, And now suddenly Panasonic decides on Kansas over Oklahoma, and then they're like, then this legislation passes. Then Panasonic's like, okay, we're going to do another $4 billion factory in Oklahoma. So it's like, look at the actions of what they're doing. This is a big deal, and I think it's going to lead to a lot of investment.
It's almost like a renaissance of manufacturing in the United States. You know, it seems like the beginnings of that, at least. Hans, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say that I mentioned this earlier, but also the timing on the announcement about creating a lithium refining plant by Tesla here. It's like the Tesla community has known for a while that this is something that we're probably going to need to do in order to have the cell supply that we need in 2025 and 2026. And then the bill gets passed and we hear about, okay, we're doing it right now. Like that seems like this is probably something that's been in the works for a while. I thought that was also another one of those things, Bradford, like you mentioned with Panasonic, that's just a signal about the actions that companies are taking to go ahead and take advantage of this.
And there is like I'd call a cold economic war between the US and China, and they're doing this in semiconductors, but also China has shown recently that they're not like the best environment to be in. Like they've tremendously supported Tesla and they help things move quickly, but they're willing to do these hardcore shutdowns, and they've had issues with electricity, and then they'll let industry get screwed by that. So I think if you're a business, you're questioning your reliance on China for things.
Yeah, and and that seems to be like a rolling, continuing thing, because it's not really advancing in any really meaningful way, so it doesn't change the circumstance. Although one thing I heard today that I thought might be good news is that Moderna is in discussions with China to provide the Moderna vaccine. And I think one of the deficiencies in China is their vaccine is not as good as the Moderna or Pfizer. So maybe that's potentially good news.
That'd help. Yeah. I think like things with China blow over. The U.S. Navy, they drove their fleet directly between China and Taiwan, and Japan flew like a huge bomber formation in between, and China didn't do anything. Like I don't think there's going to be a war. Anything can happen, but I think I'm hopeful that things like cool down.
Well, I think also it might change dramatically once Xi is reelected for a life term. I think it's like they have some kind of Congress. I forgot what it's called, but it's coming up October, November, whatever. And he'll be president forever. And maybe after that happens, there'll be less of a need to look tough or be bombastic. I'm hoping it might be the opposite too, but I'm hoping that's the outcome.
Yeah. A couple questions that come to mind. So, and I apologize if this was covered while I was letting my dog out. She was like dying to go out here. The semantics or how the savings of that battery portion of the IRA is going to flow to Tesla's statements. Is it going to show up in margin as a reduction in COGS, or is it going to be basically cash flow? Or I guess it's deferred. You said it's going to be deferred, right? I just want to make sure I understand how it's going to show up on the statements once these savings kick in. I don't know if Bradford, you covered that earlier.
That's actually a good question. So I should ask my CFO friends about that. But yeah, it could potentially come off of COGS, but I think mainly where I'm anticipating it is on the net margin line. So you have gross margin, which is where they are making the product and selling the product, and then you have other things, and then you got taxes and stuff like that. I think it's just going to help that tax number stay low. So where I see it happening on this sheet is like after the operating P&L margin. Yeah, like you have the net income or the net margin. So it's more like the income line is where I see it happening, and net income.
It's gonna show.
But it's possible that Tesla will kind of like charge itself for its own batteries, like when they start making the 4680, and take it off that way. I'd love to know. I've asked Tesla questions about this, but they've been pretty quiet.
Okay. And then the other question that comes to mind is how does Master Plan Part 3 change because of this bill? And I wonder if sort of Elon, he's been saying a couple months for like a few months. So I'm wondering if this was in the works, and then how Master Plan 3 is going to be executed was highly dependent on where this bill was going to end up, and maybe he had an inkling of where it was going. Because I don't know if you guys have thought about that at all, but I'm curious if.
Can I go first on that?
Of course.
I know I've been talking.
No, you go last, Bradford. You go last. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
So I think about when JB and Elon met and were considering Giga Nevada, or what became Giga Nevada, and they figured out how much lithium do we need, how much batteries do we need, and this is like a gigantic number. And then they figured out, okay, well, we need to make the biggest battery factory in the world, bigger than all the batteries combined, and that strategy ended up working. So I think Elon will be emboldened by this and just figure out, okay, if Tesla needs to get to 3 terawatt hours or whatever for batteries, what's all that math look like, and how does Tesla need to get there? Who do they need to bring along? Or are there miners or refiners that Tesla can kind of prepay or incentivize to like make the investment now and not be scaredy cats? Or does Tesla need to, what portion does Tesla need to do? Elon said it's all about scale. He had some adjective to it. I'm forgetting what it was. That Master Plan Part 3 is not all about like gigantic scale. So I think he'll be emboldened by that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's no doubt, like Elon is definitely privy to so many things that we find out months later. And then you have to go back and connect the dots in terms of what he was talking about. I guess you're implying for Azad a little bit that like Elon was almost waiting a little bit for this bill to be passed, come public. And then he talks about his master plan. It makes more sense. Master plan's all about scale, like that no one's ever seen in the history of humanity. I think that's kind of the paraphrase quote that he has. So yeah, I mean, it's hard not to see how this doesn't fit into that. I'm curious to see what other adjacent parts are also, in that master plan. But I mean, look, subsidy, like these tax credits are awesome, and I hope, by the way, that this actually helps a lot of the legacy auto companies actually start incentivizing them to produce EVs, because. And I've said this so many times, I think the biggest risk to Tesla is no competition. In 5 years, if there's no competition for EVs, like that's what I'm really scared about as a market capitalist, as a free market person, is like no competition for Tesla, because then that's how you get complacency. I don't care who's running the company; it's just hard to fight against that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts as well.
I think 2 elements of Master Plan 3 are: one, they'll buy the baseball team in Orange County, and they will call them the Tesla Angels. And 2, ultimately to expand the workforce. Ultimately, I don't know when this will be, but I think the bots will be an integral part of the future Tesla workforce. It'll reduce labor costs dramatically and will increase margins dramatically. And I think somehow in accomplishing whatever the grand scheme is, that will be a major element. And in terms of whether he modified it recently to fit the change in proposals, I'm sure he did. But I'm sure also Master Plan 3 has probably been in the works for the past 50 years in some fashion. And it's just bringing it up to date and making changes and being flexible.
Hans, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, when he says massive scale, it has to be global. And so whatever we do here in the United States will factor into that, but it will only be a portion of that. And so, we've already seen the way that they have just pushed on cell supply global. They are working with everyone. And this is one of the things that Warren loves to talk about, just how basically they'll buy batteries from anyone who will sell them batteries, and they'll put them in whatever products they need to. And that also helps them just to de-risk their supply chain, because every different cell manufacturer has a different supply chain. And so Tesla can leverage the entire global cell supply chain by buying from every single cell manufacturer. And then they're not as limited by, you know, say if they wanted to go to Albemarle and say, hey, like, we want all your lithium, Albemarle's gonna be like, no, you can't have all our lithium. We don't want to sell them all to one company unless you buy us, which, you know, they might also be able to do. But when Tesla's a secondary customer of Albemarle, because, okay, Albemarle's selling it to LG Chem, they're selling it to Samsung, they're selling it to CATL, they're selling it to BYD, and then Tesla's buying the batteries from them. They basically have all of Albemarle's lithium supply. They're just not the first customer. They might be the second customer. And so we'll see, how does that change going forward with Master Plan Part 3? I really hope that we do see, my biggest questions still are around raw materials. One lithium refining factory is not going to solve the raw material bottlenecks. And so that's the biggest thing that I'm looking for in Master Plan Part 3 is, okay, what are the steps that are going to be taken? And I mean, one delay could be the Inflation Reduction Act. Now that that's out there, maybe we may see Master Plan Part 3 sooner, but it could also be that there was some backroom deals and negotiations that needed to be completed, that before he announces to the world how he's going to scale the raw material supply chain, he probably needs to finish cutting all his deals that might hinge, you know, that releasing that information might change the way that the negotiation goes. So yeah, we'll see how all that plays out. I'm really looking forward to it.
I do wonder, though, along the points of what you just described as Tesla's, you were talking about how Tesla needs essentially an army of suppliers to give him as many batteries as they want, something that Warren has been talking about. It feels like this bill, once these battery manufacturers are up and running in the US, is going to create a pretty gigantic forcing function for companies to not want to buy batteries from companies that aren't taking advantage of this credit because of how significant the savings are. So is it going to create a shortage again of supply because of, or is it just going to like, it feels like we're going to go into another cliff, into another cliff where there's not going to be enough supply available because of how it's going to take a while for these guys to move to the U.S. unless other countries decide to subsidize their battery manufacturing at the same levels as the U.S., which maybe that's what this forces. You know, that's
I think you have
that came to my mind.
You have some good instinct there. Like whenever you throw a bunch of money at an issue, the prices tend to go up.
Yeah, exactly.
So that could happen.
And it definitely distorts markets too, like massively.
Yeah, I'd agree with Borgand. I think the bot is definitely going to help with scale. I really hope that Tesla focuses in on the factory bot just to help them be able to scale each location and not be as dependent on people moving to an area or whatever. I think with negotiating those contracts, Hans, I think Tesla can get creative. Possibly they can put like $2 billion in escrow or something like that. Say, hey, as we get more cash flow, we're going to put more and more in escrow. And you need to build this out for us, and it's going to be for us. So I think there's way, and it could be in a special account that Tesla can't touch except under certain circumstances, like if Albemarle doesn't hold up their end of the deal. So I'm optimistic that some of these industry old ways of doing things may move out of the way, may be solved.
Yeah.
I think, like I was going to say master plan, whatever, what I'm waiting for, and I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime, but he's going to come out with the substitute for storing energy. Because I've been alive 63 years, and when I was a little kid, they had batteries, and they still have batteries. And to me, that's not a great, compared to other technology, doesn't quite live up to it. It's to me like commercial airlines. When I was a kid, they flew like they did today, except it didn't suck as much as it does today. But I would think like at some point in time, there'll be a new way of storing energy, and it'll replace batteries and be much more efficient. And that will be the big leap forward.
Interesting. Yeah, I like that thought. I guess it would be some form of energy, maybe not battery in the sense that we're talking about, where you need an anode and a cathode and something in the middle to sort of store it, so on and so forth. But it'd be a different way of there was something. Okay, I listen to Joe Rogan from time to time because he's hilarious, and he had Eddie Bravo on, who's like a crazy conspiracy theorist or something. But there was something about like bricks being able to store energy or something. That's where my head goes to when you say that's like, can we utilize existing materials to to be able to do that? Anyway, that's just a tangent.
I was thinking of Reese's peanut butter cups, storing it in Reese's peanut butter cups.
That would be even better. Yeah.
Well, lithium is the not anatomically, but atom wise, it's the smallest metal, and it also gives up its ion or whatever the most freely, as far as I understand. And they're talking about sodium batteries because of how expensive lithium is, but lithium's really the best that there is. And I don't think there's going to be like a new atom that's smaller than lithium. I think there could be some ways to store energy for sure, but it's not going to be smaller than a lithium battery. I don't think, unless you somehow did it in diamonds, but or I don't know, something weird like that. But diamonds are pretty expensive.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to quickly hit on this, since this topic of the IRA and sort of how it's becoming a force and function for U.S. manufacturing and for battery suppliers to come here, and theoretically, and we talked about it as well, it should be a forcing function for legacy auto to really and truly go hardcore into EV manufacturing. I wonder if there's going to be a tone shift. It already kind of started, right? You had all those EV commercials during the Super Bowl this year, and which helped Tesla sort of, yeah, that's what happens. Somebody else markets, Tesla goes up. So, but I wonder if the confirmation of this thing, like the chasm has been crossed, but we're talking about the S curve, right? The S curve, where is the S curve going to kick in? I wonder if the vertical starts once in the next few quarters here, once this thing starts to take hold, and then Honda, Toyota, all these other automakers that have been very slow in making this transition start this mass marketing campaign that we'll see everywhere about, look at us, we're electric now. Because I always try to think about my head always goes to culture when I think about Tesla's impact, and I've been following the freaking company for so long that's where my head goes to. How's it impacting culture, and how does it relate to where it is on its trajectory to its total world domination? Once we see Honda and Toyota commercials coming out, is that the vertical of the S curve, and is that the confirmation that where we're going has truly and earnestly begun, and now it's a train that if you don't hop on, you're literally screwed. And I don't know if we're there yet, but that's where my head goes. Like this bill, to this point, I still can't believe just how impactful this bill is. It truly blows my mind, and we're talking about it before, Bradford, you came on. It was almost by accident on how it's impacting Tesla so positively. With the narrative that we get from the U.S. government is like they omit Tesla from conversations. Elon and the Democratic government are not playing really nice. And this bill comes along, and it's this just incredible boon to. It's nuts. It's completely nuts.
Yeah. Ford's new Mustang, the one they just introduced, is not electric. They just introduced it. Seemed like it'd be a complete whiff, in my opinion. But it's, they think that's one of their popular models, and they make it not electric. That didn't seem to show a lot of foresight.
Well, maybe they made it for people who are still fighting it.
Oh, I'm sure you're right.
Yep.
I think the entree to this, as far as it becoming even more popularized, is Legacy's ready to make hybrids and ready to make them in scale, and so they may say we're electrifying, but it's hybrids, and they may do this thing with hybrids and leases where I think that at a certain point you could get a Nissan Leaf for like $100 a month or less, like in Georgia, the state of Georgia.
They pay you $100 a month, I believe.
Wow. So I think that's what we see first, but I think one reason why Jim Farley, when he was at Monroe, it really disappointed me. Like, he didn't communicate a vision. He didn't say why they're doing it. They just said, we're doing this. And I think there's a reason they don't say why, is because they're not ready to make 1 million EVs yet. Mm-hmm. So I think as these other players scale up their factories to make pure EVs, then I think they'll start to sell the public on it.
I see.
Yeah. So the thing that I think about is there's no existence proof for a legacy OEM converting to all EV. Tesla's the only successful EV company in existence, period, bar none. I don't think it's possible without just think about how hard, like how close to death Tesla came so many times. I don't think it's possible for legacy auto manufacturers who are not agile. I mean, we've all heard Joe Justice talk about it there. I've been seeing people, mentioning Joe Justice in the comments here. Like, without Tesla's culture, I don't think it's possible to make EVs profitably. I mean, these are companies that they can't even make a profit on gas cars
as a legacy automaker.
As a legacy automaker,
yeah.
Like, if you only make 6-7% margin on your existing ICE fleet, how can you transition to a more expensive for you personally to produce EV car? We know that Tesla can make an EV cheaper than you can make an ICE car, but you can't make an EV cheaper than you can make an ICE car. I still just I don't see how these companies are going to survive. I think the IRA helps, but I don't know that it's enough. And so, when you're saying we're going to see we're definitely going to see marketing. People are going to try. You might honestly see the marketing campaign and then watch the company blow up within a year or 2 years of each other. And so it's going to be a very interesting roller coaster.
Yeah.
I know the only other company that makes any money, and I think they make like peanuts, but BYD makes some money selling, but they sell as many hybrids as they do EVs, but they actually are making a profit on their EVs. It's really small. But I think that's the only other company that actually is generating a profit in the sale of EV cars, which is pretty amazing, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a certain date. I can't pinpoint it exactly, but it's around an event that I think everything will shift. It almost be like, how lemmings commit suicide, they just fall off the cliffs and all that stuff.
Give us the date, Yashu. Give us
Is this
the date.
insider trading? Is this insider trading we have to worry about now?
Cybertruck release. I think when the Cybertruck release happens, that's when everything's going to change, because now all of a sudden, like, everyone has, whether you like it or not, we all love Teslas. Everyone has like an EV soy boy myth, like stereotype around people that drive electric. I think when the Cybertruck comes out, there's a large demographic of owners. I think the trucks are 30% of the U.S. car market, new car market. Like, all of a sudden, it's a new pool of investorship. I think it's a new pool of people that think, hold on, like, EVs aren't just glorified golf carts that are have way better specs than even like luxury supercars do most of the time. Oh, it's actually has utility. I can take it to work. It's actually cheaper. Insurance is better. A million other things that I think it'll open up for. So I think what will happen is legacy auto, when the Cybertruck does come out, let's say September next year, let's set that date for now or something. I think what we'll start to see is legacy auto have kind of this like internal spaz fit where they have to pretty much double down on something that they economically cannot double down on. We know that if legacy auto today could shift their business to keep the same margins, even drop them a little bit lower, but do all electric, they would, but they can't. That's the problem. So I think Cybertruck might be the forcing mechanism that almost makes these legacy autos kind of fall like lemmings, is my guess.
Yep. Yep.
I agree 100%.
I would say at least they're going to visit bankruptcy court at least one more time.
I think Cybertruck's very triggering. You can't look at the design and say that's for wimps. In downtown cities, it looks super cool. I remember when it was in New York City when Elon went on SNL, and it just looks super sweet with the neon lights and stuff. And it's like a tank almost. It's like tanks on the streets. And I think that'll, even if people see the Cybertruck and some people have a reaction that they hate it, but they're going to look again at Tesla. It's just going to cause them to look at the other stuff. So I totally agree with you that I'd be surprised if it didn't happen around that time.
And you could definitely see that be like an immediate impact to Ford's business if the F-150 is the thing that they make all their profit on, and then all of a sudden they even see a 20% reduction in orders that shift over to Cybertruck. That's very material to their business.
It's a big problem.
Yeah,
big.
It's not even the orders, to be honest, Hans. I think it's the brand loyalty, because I mean, whether we like it or not, Legacy Auto have a lot of brand support. I know people, like a lot of them are grandparents, to be fair. I'm only going to buy Ford. I'm only going to buy GM. Like, they love their brand of car. And so whether we like it or not, a lot of that's going to get phased out. Cybertruck's going to turn a lot of heads. And at the very least, it's going to bring up a lot of questions at the dinner table between families of different generations that have to say, hold on, like, this isn't like this EV thing is not what I thought it was. All of a sudden it's shifting. So, when I think Cybertrucks come out, let's say September next year, for the next, to be honest, I could see this hype going on for the first 2 years of the Cybertruck being out on the streets. Like in Canada, I'm not expecting any Cybertruck deliveries until like 3 years past the first delivery or something, because I just feel like just flood the US market. That's where kind of all the Cybertrucks need to be for kind of indefinitely. By the way, don't hate me, Canadian people, for saying that. I just think I think it makes more sense to just sell it in America to begin with. But it's going to be massive.
Just the Americans hate you. Don't worry about
That's
it.
true.
Yeah,
true.
the collective what the fuck moment that society is going to experience is really like being completely misunderstood, I think, by the general public. Bradford, go ahead.
Yeah, I just thought of something that's huge is with the Cybertruck pre-orders. There's a lot of people who ordered multiple Cybertrucks, and part of it is for potential Cybertruck robotaxis. So think about this: if Tesla does figure out autonomy or gets much closer by the time Cybertruck comes out, those people aren't going to be canceling their orders for their robo Cybertrucks. That would be a really big deal if the two could kind of combine at the same time. What do you think about that, Hans?
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm definitely hoping that FSD, like the existence proof of FSD, has already come and gone by the time. And that was what I was gambling on when I made the orders. I was like, this is my option call on FSD, that if it's really, well, that and the stock. But yeah, if it proves out that you can use FSD and that the value is significantly more than the $10,000 or $12,000, wherever it was that you reserved your, or $8,000 even for some people, reserved your FSD price, then the value of that vehicle, even just for resale, is significantly more, much less, if you can actually operate it as a robo-taxi and get an income stream and it can pay for itself. Like I'm sure people right now who are working on a financing package for people who have these cars on order that, like, yeah, we're just gonna take a percentage of your robo-taxi profit, and that's how you're gonna finance the 50 Cybertrucks that you put on order that you didn't know how you were gonna pay for.
I was thinking of when they're out. I live near LA, and some people think there's traffic here, and I can only imagine, like, in the middle of rush hour, being on one of the major freeways with a brand new Cybertruck, everybody gawking, and it'd be like the movie Independence Day. Everybody
You gotta
stops
clear
their
that
car,
left
gets
lane,
out,
bro.
and looks at this alien vehicle. You can only imagine.
Yeah.
They
It's so fundamentally different than any other car.
they're going to be like driving billboards. Like the advertising space on the side of a Cybertruck for the first several years is going to be extremely valuable. Like you could probably pay for your Cybertruck lease, just be like, hey, yeah, whatever company, I'm going to slap your logo on the side here. And
There'll be an Elon for president billboard.
well, and I came across this thought because I wanted to buy them. I was managing a cleaning company for a while, and one of the divisions of the business was carpet cleaning, and I was like, this would be the best carpet cleaning vehicle that we could get. Like the advertising alone that I would get driving this thing around town, like I wouldn't have to spend any money on any other customer acquisition or advertising period. Like just driving this thing around town and cleaning people's carpets will be all the advertising that I will need.
Right.
And then it's a great vehicle, like work vehicle. And so I'm sure, you know, and this is any small business owner who does a service business, a construction company, a plumber, an electrician, like all these people, there will be the first guy in each city who does it, who buys it, who gets it, and he's going to get all of the value of having that vehicle be his work vehicle. That's his advertising vehicle. You know, You could have Cyber Steamer, carpet cleaning company, and like the marketing value in that is going to be incredible for, you know, a select few first mover people. And that's just like one tiny element in this whole big thing.
That's plus the write-off, right? You write off the vehicle
Yep.
too, 'cause the business vehicle, and you're advertising on it. So
It's an unbelievable opportunity. So Hans, sounds like you've been thinking about this a lot.
Maybe just a little bit.
I also think, and this is just on the Cybertruck top, like it's coming. You know, and that's another exciting thing, is that in another 2 to 3 quarters, this thing's legitimately going to be driving around Austin. You know, you're going to get off the airport in about a year's time, and you're going to be driving to your destination, and a triangle on wheels is going to show up, and you're going to be like, what the hell just happened? You know, and so like the look of Austin is going to look like, for the first, as they start ramping up, it's going to give us such a amazing, cool, futuristic feel once you get out of the, you know, if you're not part of this city. And then the other thing too that I keep going back to, and I put out a couple videos on this topic with Cybertruck. The margins on this vehicle appear to be like, we think the margins are going to get crazy now. The Cybertruck potential from a margin perspective seems otherworldly, and I would love to hear, and we have a panel here, and I've been trying to poke holes at this thing and to see if maybe I'm thinking about this incorrectly, but to me it seems like Cybertruck can achieve 50% margins at a relatively good scale. It doesn't even have to be fully ramped, and the way I get to that number is, you know, Elon made a comment back at the Cybertruck reveal that Cybertruck, they're looking to achieve Model 3 costs or lower, because they were looking to present this vehicle as a everyday man work truck, right? Or anybody who can afford a pickup truck can buy it. And that's why they priced it at $40,000 before the COVID thing happened. But even after COVID, and even after all these different things that Tesla has been working on, I don't think that target moves away from Tesla. I still feel like Tesla and that team are going to look to manufacture this truck at a similar cost, or maybe even below what the Fremont Model 3 will be at, which by my estimations, and Matt Smith from Good Solar has worked on this as well, props to him, this is kind of where I borrowed this number from, $38,000 per Cybertruck. But they're going to be able to sell this thing for probably $75,000 ASP at least for the first few years, if you compare it to their competition of, say, Rivian, or I don't even know if they're competitors, but let's just use that as an example. The Ford F-150 Raptor, these trucks start at 70, 75, 73. Why wouldn't Tesla be able to make 50% margins on top of this? And we're not taking into account the benefits they would get from this IRA bill and the $7,500 tax credit. And like, tell me if I'm thinking about this incorrectly. It looks like Tesla is going to have a vehicle that's going to be mass produced, that's going to be at 50% margins or above. Am I fucking stupid? Somebody please help me.
yes.
Thank you. I was
I was
hoping
gonna
somebody
say-
would take that.
I was thinking that I've heard your discussions about it, and I'm familiar with the numbers. I guess the only thing would be one, how long it takes to ramp up. So if it takes 9 years to ramp up, and the costs are actually not 37, 38, but they're much higher until we get fully ramped up, then the margins could be significantly lower. But I think once we're up to ramp up and costs are contained plus the battery, we got to be 50% margin or more.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Elon wants to charge 50% margins, but as you had mentioned, also like there may not be any choice. Like either the wait is going to be 3 years or the margins are going to be 50%. Like you're going to basically end up having to choose one, and one of them seems to make a lot more sense than the other.
I think it's going to be close on the cost. You don't have a paint shop, you don't have to stamp the panels, but it is bigger than a Model Y. You do like the tires are much bigger. They may have special brakes on the Cybertruck that would add some cost. Maybe that's only on the top trim. And I think they'll start at 100,000 for the Plaid, and if you want to get it first, you got to get the Plaid. And I'm guessing maybe 80 for the quad motor, maybe a little more. No way that the I don't even think the bottom trim would be less than a Model Y now. And the Model Y is 66,000 now, right now in the US. So I think it'd be close to 50% margin. It'd be at least 40. So yeah, it'll be. And initially, when it's all top trim, then it's going to be above 50 for a long time. Yep.
It's crazy.
Versus a Raptor,
Yeah.
you're going to want the $80,000 Cybertruck every time.
Yeah,
100%. Plus, you get the tax credits.
I was just thinking about a nerdy question that probably no one cares about, and that's whether or not the Plaid Cybertruck will use 18650s or if they'll use 4680s, just because the Plaid Model S specifically uses the 18650 or 1865, whatever you want to call it, cell specifically for a reason, and that is heat dissipation. What we've seen from Sandy Monroe's Model Y structural pack teardown doesn't look like the thermal performance to me of the structural 4680 pack is on par with a Model S Plaid battery pack. And so, yeah, just, musings, it won't really matter. They'll make it one way or the other. They'll figure out the engineering problems. But yeah, I think, okay, debuted here. Cybertruck may use an 1865 battery cell for the Plaid trim.
I'm looking through the battery day slides because I thought they had a slide where they broke down which models were going to use which batteries, if I remember correctly. Here, let me see. Here we go. Oops, I don't know how to use technology again. So high nickel, mass sensitive was good. So they put the Cybertruck and the Semi.
But the 1865s in the Model S Plaid are high nickel cells. So that doesn't necessarily dictate form factor, whether that's going to be a 2170, a 4680, or an 1865.
Is the energy density high enough on those?
Yeah. Yeah, the energy density is pretty close either way. You do get a little bit of a loss because you have more cell casings per volume and for weight. But yeah, your thermal performance is by far the factor that you're going to be doing your engineering around. And so you've got to, and it may be that they can use a 4680 cell and they have to make some special accommodations in the pack to get better thermal performance out of it than they're getting in normal Model Ys.
what's interesting about here is that the Cybertruck and the luxury SUV market, the battery production, looks to be in the same sort of ballpark from the Battery Day presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Again, remember this presentation was about 2 years ago. This has to have changed, right? There's no way they're thinking they can only sell 200,000 of these, right? Or do you think it's going to be more? Because it's basically what it's implying here, right? If I'm looking at this correctly.
So, no, I mean, so luxury SUV, you're looking at their, because even at that point in time, Elon was predicting that. Well, no, so luxury and so that's S and X. You're right. So I was thinking that he was comparing that to Model Y. Yeah, I'm thinking that's got to be a lot bigger.
What'd you say, Bradford?
I think that what they're showing on this slide is the global market for EVs, and just saying where things slot in. So Tesla said they were targeting like 2 or 3 terawatt hours. So 10 is like maybe the end state, or maybe it's a global market. So I think that's what this is showing.
I got it. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so maybe it's not an apples to apples comparison necessarily. They're just breaking it down by segment for global battery production. Okay.
I thought they were targeting 250,000.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's we're almost at 2 hours, but I want to hit one more topic if possible. We do have a practicing lawyer on deck here, and I've been dying to ask this question, Mr. Borghand, aka Richard, and I'm just trying to pronounce it like your name. But I'm wondering, so I'm thinking about Twitter, right? And you know, I think Richard, you've had some thoughts about. I've seen you in the comments where we're talking about Twitter in the past. I would love to get your opinion as somebody who's, you know, I'm assuming going to be very familiar with the process that this is undertaking. What the hell is going to happen? Like, where are we heading? Do you think? What do you think of what's happening so far? And then we'll turn it into a conversation.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Chancery Court in Delaware, so I've never practiced there. So I'm just doing it based upon what I heard. And I would say up until the whistleblower, I think it was a slam dunk against Elon. And I think it looked like Elon was trying to get out of the deal, and there was probably some communication suggesting that beforehand. I think once the whistleblower came forward on issues unrelated to the bots, and I think his major issue, I think, was security and privacy, that kind of created a whole different setup. I expected Elon to file a cross complaint. I expected him to try to include those claims, and they're in there. So I really think the person that has the most to lose is the CEO of Twitter, to the extent that he may have been aware of the allegations that were made by the whistleblower. And because of that, I would think he wouldn't want to be deposed in this matter. He would try to the extent he could to keep this under wraps as much as possible. And I'm sure that they're trying to negotiate a resolution, a new sale price on the purchase of Twitter. The problem for him is that's just half of his problem, because let's say they reconstruct the deal so it costs, instead of $54.20, it ends up being $42. Well, every shareholder of Twitter who was going to get $54.20, who's now going to get $42, is going to be pissed. And so I think ultimately the problem is the CEO and the board believe they're going to get sued one way or the other. And that's what they're trying to figure out, where their exposure would be the least. They have insurance that probably covers their legal fees and legal costs. And 99% of the time, 98% of the time, a resolution will arise. So that's what I would expect, that there will be some resolution involving a discount, and then they'll play the next round against the shareholders, and they'll try to negotiate something like that. They'll try to incorporate insurance money to try to get whatever deal done, and that will be the end game. I think otherwise, I think the judge would have been inclined to rule against Elon before that.
So from your perspective, you think some sort of settlement here is the most likely outcome based on sort of the variables you walked us through? Again, this is just speculation. We're not saying this is what's going to happen.
Yeah, based upon every case that's ever taken place on the world, most of them are going to settle anyway. Usually it's cost or risk, and here there's risk. Elon really kind of knows what his downside is, so it is what it is. He's got the wherewithal to complete the transaction, and if not, he has got extra money. But the board and the CEO of Twitter, that's a different position. And I really think that's where the risk lies. So I would expect them to be really aggressive in trying to resolve it with him.
Okay.
And selling it is a better, at least for the board, is a better sale to their shareholders. Just the deal being wiped out and they end up not getting the 54.20 and the value of the company is significantly reduced because of all the circumstances is not a good outcome for them.
Yeah, that's kind of where my head goes. It's like if the deal falls through and Elon does walk away, Twitter becomes a less valuable asset immediately because Elon's not tied to the company, and then B, Elon has very openly said that this is important to him, so he'll probably whip up a competitor. And he said Twitter is going to allow him to go 2 to 3 years faster, and now Twitter then has to deal with a competitor in 2 to 3 years. Like that doesn't seem like a winning combination for the company.
Yeah.
So they have a lot of incentives to settle or to at least help the deal close, right?
And I guess another alternative way he could do it is he could increase the amount of the termination fee. That was like a $1 billion fee. He could increase it. The board would then be able to say, we're only entitled to 1, but we got 3 or 5 or 2. And so they've put it in the bank. It somehow helps the value of Twitter. And they can argue at least they got better than they were entitled to and move on from there. And then Elon would have a bunch of money freed up. For me, $3 billion would hit my pocketbook quite heavily, but not quite as much his.
Yeah. Any thoughts from the panel?
I think the outstanding risk of Elon potentially stepping in at any minute and knowing that he can buy Tesla stock the next day should be like some immediate upside surprise. Like I'm not sure what percentage of risk that is to shorts, but it is non-material. I think it's non-zero, of course, but like Elon stepping in, like Elon knows what his timeline's looking at even right now. Obviously we're not privy to that. So if he's already behind the scenes looking to settle and then presumably sets a date for settlement and then has a plan to buy Tesla stock for the following week after or something, knows maybe about S&P, Moody's upgrades, who knows? Like, there's a lot of moving parts here, but I guess it's exciting. I mean, we were having a conversation about this before where we were saying right now it's Twitter. In a month from now, when Twitter's story's over, it'll be something else. So it's like a revolving door of narratives to follow here.
Yep.
I think about the totality of Tesla shares. Let's say this is all the Tesla shares. And the shares that Elon owns are basically off the market. So it does matter if Elon were to take some cash and put it back into Tesla shares, because essentially he's taking these shares that are floating around the market. They may get in the hands of people that occasionally trim or panic or whatever, or buy a Tesla, or have someone have a wedding or whatever, and taking those shares and taking them off the market, and that lowers the supply, which tends to increase the price. So I think it does matter a bit. Okay. And it may be a reason why we're below $400 a share, or below 333 or whatever, because Elon essentially added more shares to the market by selling.
That makes sense. Hans, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm nothing new. I really do hope that he does end up with Twitter one way or the other, and I'm sure that they'll figure it out at a price that kind of works for most people. Like everyone will be somewhat upset, but it'll basically work.
I know who will definitely win.
Lawyers.
Ooh.
The lawyers definitely win.
Yep.
Definitely win.
This is freaking. Oh, they always win. They always win.
By the way,
even when they lose, they win. It's
not even about the money. I'm just thinking how much time suck this is for Elon. Like, think about where that time could better be spent. It's just But it is what it is. It's his money. He can do whatever he wants. But
I wonder about that, by the way, about the time thing. I think maybe he just operates better on having like 97,000 things going on in no time.
Yeah, maybe.
And that kind of like that constant deadline may be a good motivating factor for him. Not for me, but for him.
I think there's something to that for sure. For sure. Well, y'all, 2 hours in. It felt like a freaking breeze. Incredible panel. Thank you all so much. Any closing thoughts from any of you before we wrap this sucker up?
One quick callback to the Cybertruck discussion. So 1,100 gigawatt hours per year in pickup trucks is 5.5 million pickup trucks per year if they use 200 kilowatt hour packs.
Okay.
So, but the 3,000 number for semi, like, I don't know. It seems like a lot of cells being allocated to semi when the fleet of semis is not really that huge. I could definitely see Cybertruck sales using as many cells as semi.
I do wonder, like, the commercial aspect of it, that I feel like maybe vans and whatever other types of transportation vehicles they come up with, that's going to take a bulk of that. How do you think about that?
It definitely could be. And the other thing is, if they dramatically decrease the cost per mile of freight using Tesla Semi, the demand for the number of Tesla Semis on the road as we shift probably away from a lot of stuff moving on rail to moving overland, it's going to dramatically increase the TAM of the semi market if robotaxi is achieved, or you can do platooning, or there's a number of different potential business models. So that may be what they're basically planning for. There is replacing essentially all freight with electric overland transportation.
Got it.
I wanted to thank you all. Thank you for having me here. And Farzad, I appreciate the check. Thank you very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, the $1 million check. Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. This is how much we pay people when they come on. So you should go become a patron, because apparently I give out checks.
I am, actually.
Yeah. Yes, you are. Yeah. Thank you all very much. Yashu or Bradford, any other closing comments from your side?
Blueberries are not juju. That's it. Thanks for coming in.
When you came on, I wish that I had some blueberries nearby that I could.
Maybe there's a cyber van that comes with smaller tires that's used in the Tesla commercial. I think that would be pretty tight. Last year, Elon donated $5 billion to his foundation. I'm wondering what Elon does with that, and I wonder if maybe Elon could spend some time on the Texas Institute of Technology and Science. From what I hear, Giga Austin, they're around 3,000 employees, and they're struggling a little bit to add employees, get up to 12 or 15,000, whatever their target is. If you create a university in Austin, that would help attract more talent to the area.
Yeah.
Props to Elon. Just gave $50 million to the St. Jude's Children's Hospital. So props to him.
Yeah,
awesome.
For sure. Yeah, he gives a lot more than people realize, and I think that's something that doesn't get covered as much, and I think it should. But I think the Tesla community in general loves to give, and that's one of my favorite things about this community is just how, like, my goodness, like, this impromptu conversation just came out of nowhere, and we're here. Like, I feel like we're doing a much better job than any traditional media outlet would be able to do to actually figure out what the hell's happening with the company in the coming months and quarters. So that's props to the entire community, and it's just, I feel very lucky and sort of honored and blessed to be part of it. So thank you all very much. Seriously.
Yeah. Thanks for having us on.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody who's watched. Thank you, comments. Thank you, chat. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all the supporters. Mwah. Love you guys. We'll see you next week.
Take
Peace
care,
out.
Peace.
And broadcast.
Bye for now.
Thank you.
Here we go.